Falling into a ravine is one of the worst things you can do, and it isn't just because of the poison ivy risk. The worn paths and trails are a protection as much as they are a guide. I appreciate that insight now more than I ever have before. I was hiking my favorite trail, and it isn't for everybody. It has points in the path where there's room for just one person, and you're towing a sheer drop. The ground was just soft enough that the dirt under my heel gave way, and I was spilling down into some forbidden region of the woods where you couldn't just climb back up to where you were. You had to walk around, and the only way around was deeper into the woods. It soon became clear as I trekked on that people just didn't journey this far in. I was breaking new ground for the average hiker. Something about it told me that it wasn't a good thing. I began to see some signs of human life. I found an axe lodged in a large old tree stump. I found a tin pail that wasn't rusted beyond all use, and it had probably held water recently. Perhaps I was going to find somebody that would be able to help me, or at least find shelter. I didn't exactly find a clearing. It was more like I had found a place where a crumbling, sagging two-story house was squeezed in among the claustrophobic trees. Some of the trees leaning up against it might have been the reason the house had yet to fall over. I tried knocking on the front door, which nearly fell inward. Nobody answered. The place that had looked like where you couldn't tell if somebody still lived there. If they didn't, it was recently vacated. If they did, the place was all but completely worn out of its livability. I tried a light. It delayed on coming on, just long enough to make me think it wasn't going to work. Surely, I wasn't so far away from getting out of the forest that I would need to stay in the house for shelter. I began circling the house, just in case the resident was out on the property somewhere. I didn't see much of note until I came around to the back of the house. This is where there were 6 tool sheds. 2 of them looking like they were recent purchases. The rest seemed to be in the same condition as the house was. There was a nearby well constructed of heavy and solid stone. On a whim, I checked the water inside. That was the beginning of the discomfort settling in. Something was poking out of the murky water. A chink of something that looked an awful lot like bones. But there wasn't enough of it to know for sure. It could just as easily been a set of sticks stripped of their bark to expose the pale wood. Okay, I had to put my mind at ease before I was going to hang around and meet the person that owned this place. I checked one of the tool sheds. Of course it was locked. The next one was not. Another disturbing, yet ambiguous sight greeted me. There were some dark stains on the plywood floor. They could have been rust from the roof, or possibly blood. For some reason, it took me that long to see the heavy chains tucked up against the sides of the shed's interior. They appeared to have shackles on them. Then, I saw the heavy, old-fashioned scissors on the floor that were long and rusty and stained just like the floor. Then, I saw the fragment of a human ear and half of an eyeball with the optic nerve still attached. After nervously circling the other sheds, more than one reeked of death when you stood just outside of it. And that's when it was cemented in my mind that this was some place I did not want to be, as if I already didn't get that after seeing what I had. That revelation hit me, though, just in time to hear footsteps approaching from the distance. There was no way I was going to outrun without drawing any attention to myself, nor would I be able to sneak away, since the forest floor was littered with all kinds of things. I decided to hide behind one of the sheds. The footsteps coming straight out to the sheds, and they stood still for way too long. They must have seen the front door. They knew that somebody had been around. I held my breath, even though I was desperate for for any bit of air. My vision was pulsating just from the sheer force of the palpitations of my heart. Part of my fancy turned dark, and I imagined that the very shed I was hiding behind was going to end up becoming my final resting place. Cautiously, my visitors stalked around. I attempted to match the pace so that I could slide around the shed with minimal noise. I heard the door to one of the sheds open, and I heard the voice of a woman, but it was muffled. Apparently, she was gagged. She tried to scream but held her gag fast. Then I heard crying. A deep and gravelly voice told her not to worry, that he would make sure she was safe. For some reason, he kind of chuckled at the last remark. He reminded her to keep quiet, shut the door, and lock the shed. He opened another one, and there was yet another muffled female voice. He told her that she was getting out of hand, and so she was the one to be on the dinner table. He just tried and was patient. He didn't hit her as hard as he could have, but she just would not learn her lesson and keep quiet. So, he had to deal with her in the only way that would work. After another violent interaction and leaving, my stomach lurched, and my lungs felt like they were billowing and rippling like sails catching a strong wind. I had to get away and get help for these women, whatever was going on. He was taking forever, though, apparently relishing the terror of his victims. At long last, he went inside his house, and I could hear him casually whistling as he went, and I then heard the clatter of the front door. I resisted every urge to sprint, as much as every natural survival mechanism was trying to drive my legs like pistons. I got out of there, got in touch with the police, and they searched double time, since the one girl had a literal deadline of dinner. Well, they got there in time. They found evidence that he had apparently been killing, raping, and eating in that house for years. A sadistic cannibal. One of the victims actually kept in touch with me, and I almost wish she wouldn't have, because just seeing her and hearing her voice is a bitter reminder of what I nearly escaped. Now, when I hear her voice, I hear it the way it was sounding when she was there, crying. The healing process is different for all of us. I've been getting very sedentary since I don't go hiking anymore. That's kind of ruined it for me, to be honest. I need a form of exercise, but I'm not getting any younger, and I'm not getting any braver. I don't know if this was the story you were expecting, but it's one that's haunted me for a very long time, and although incredibly disturbing, and can probably even be made into a movie, there are realities like this out there, unfortunately. Long story short, I got lost in the woods in the backwater country of Florida. It's one of those places where you don't really want to get lost, because you never know when some alligator or snake is going to be right in the middle of your path. I looked out a little bit, and instead of running into various local wildlife, I ran into a house. The property was overgrown, which made me think that maybe it wasn't lived in anymore, which meant that I could take shelter without being interrupted. I was exhausted after a long day of trying to find my way out. The front door didn't appear to be locked, and the place smelt of moss and rotting wood, but otherwise, it would suffice as protection against the wilderness, animals, and weather. I could tell it was going to be a dark night. Obviously, I didn't have any lighting, and the sun was sinking quick. It would obviously be a bad idea to completely use up the battery of my cell phone by using it as a flashlight. I decided to quickly have a look around the place, so as to know the layout, and to make extra double sure that I wasn't going to be having any company in the middle of the night, human or animal. I found what might have been the bones of a dog, but he obviously wasn't going to bother me while I was sleeping. I almost didn't trust the steps of the stairwell either, but they appeared sturdy enough. The big shock came when I located the upstairs bedroom. It had only one window, so lighting was very limited. The dying daylight fell upon the bloated, decaying body of a girl who was laying on the broken remains of the bed. After my near heart attack subsided, it was clear that I was going to live. I took a closer look at the girl while trying not to vomit. She must have been there for several days and was in such an advanced state of decay. I wanted us, like me. She had gotten lost and probably taken shelter here. I got paranoid and began wondering if there was some kind of poisonous substance in the house that would cause her ultimately demise. I never read anything about black mold working so quickly on a person's respiratory system. If that is what it is, she must have been very allergic and sensitive. I didn't want to get closer to her to see if there were any signs of foul play. I was too exhausted, too frightened, too keen on keeping on track through the night. I had no choice but to sleep downstairs, beneath her rotting body. So I set my belongings on the table, and was somehow still standing downstairs, and I wrapped my jacket around me, tried to get comfortable on the floor with minimal movement. Sleep did not come easy when it did, and it did not stay long. I often heard cracks and groans, and sounds that I wouldn't expect from an empty old house. I awoke for the 50th time to a sound I didn't want to hear, and I still think I could hear it to this day when I'm trying to sleep. I heard one set of feet walking on the floor above me. I didn't hear anyone go up the stairs. The footfalls were just settling there, right above me in the bedroom where the dead girl was. My mind began racing for some kind of rational explanation. If somebody had entered the house, they surely would have seen me and done more than just walk right past me, wouldn't they? Whoever was up there was pacing in a circle, steady. Something about it was driving me to madness. And then the sounds started coming down the stairs, in the dark. I was petrified. I could draw air into my lungs, but I couldn't exhale. The footfalls casually strode across the floor, over to the table. I then heard the legs of the chair pull out, and I heard the sound of something settling into the chair. Then there was silence. I must have blacked out from sheer terror. The next thing I knew, it was daylight. I got up to find that I had dreamed none of it. The dead girl was seated at the table, her head lolled back, gazing up at the ceiling. I thought this must have been some sort of sick joke. I quickly snatched my belongings and got out of there. It's an experience that still haunts me to this day. I've been denying that it ever happened, but the effects on me and my ability to function are all too real. And do I believe she got up and walked down there? No. I honestly believe somebody, whoever killed her or was staying there, snuck into the house, and for whatever sick, twisted, sadistic reason, grabbed her body, picked it up, brought it downstairs, and stuck it in the chair, and then left. Why? I couldn't exactly tell you. Maybe this was a case of the real psycho. I don't know. I'm just glad I didn't end up like that girl. Anyway, I'm needing to share this with somebody before I lose my ever-loving mind. Like I said, I still think I could hear footsteps at night. I am not quite well, so this is where my story ends.